What if I told you that the best HR leaders aren't coming from business school, they're coming from the battlefield? Welcome to the future of work with AI. I'm Ryan Kohler, and today we're diving into something that completely flipped my perspective on leadership and human resources. Meet Dina Perreault, Army veteran, Dragon Slayer, and the HR executive who's been scaling people-first systems across 2 employees at 31 locations. But here's what's wild. Her nickname Dragon Slayer didn't start as a compliment. Her executive coach basically called her out for creating chaos, and she leaned into it so hard she built her entire leadership philosophy around it. In this conversation with Dina and Emily, you're going to hear how 10 years in the military, including leading 150 soldiers in Saudi Arabia at age 23, gave Dina a framework that's the complete opposite of typical corporate HR. We're talking operational empathy, accountability without bribery, and why she believes perfectionism is the prettiest dragon in the cave. Plus, she drops this bomb. No one's going to die today, so why are we freaking out? That's the kind of perspective that changes everything. Whether you're leading people, being led, or just trying to figure out where AI fits into all this human complexity, this one's going to challenge how you think about work itself. Let's dive in.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Talent Talks. I'm your host, Emily Alvarez, and I am excited to be joined today by Dina Perreault. She is all the way from Philadelphia. And today we are going to be talking about a very important topic in corporate structure and human resources. The topic of this episode is really slaying chaos with soul. We're going to be talking about Dina's personal experience with building people first systems at scale. Dina's got an amazing background and is a military veteran. So thank you for your service, Dina, in
Thank
the
you.
Army. And tell us a little bit about your background, because this is a fascinating journey. I believe personally that veterans, people who have served in the military, make the best HR people, and we'll get into why I believe that, along with
Okay.
your brilliant framework. But tell us about how this all kind of started, because you went from the Army to HR, which most people
hmm
would think is not a normal
It's
parallel.
not a straight path,
Yeah,
right? It's not a normal
right,
straight path. Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. So, I mean, I won't go too far back, but I'm the first person in my family to go to college, and we were not able to afford it. So, although I was offered an NCAA scholarship to play volleyball on the beach in Florida, my family wouldn't let me go. It was a little too far away from New England, where I grew up. So I did what other volleyball players and cheerleaders do, right? I joined the Army,
Yeah.
and the Army gave me a scholarship. So I did play volleyball and softball in college and worked on that ROTC scholarship. And when I graduated, although I was a developmental psych major,
Right.
they needed people to go into the Patriot missile systems because it was during the time of Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So
Ah,
I've
yeah.
totally just aged myself there. But during that time, they needed a lot of good people to work on missile systems and deploy to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So yeah, I graduated. I went right into the military working with the Patriot system. And I spent about a little more than 10 years in the military. And then because of some personal situations happening, I decided to exit the military. And I was looking for my first job as a civilian. And I was actually offered a job doing turnarounds for a chemical plant in Philadelphia, for refining and
Yeah,
supply.
yeah.
And I went up for my baseline physical because you're at this big chemical plant. And the HR manager reached out and said, "Hey, I'd like to take you to lunch." And I said, "Well, I'm based out of DC, so I'm going to get back, get my kids out of daycare, right? Like I've got, as long as I get back on time." And he said, "No worries, just
Sure.
an hour. Let me feed you. Want to welcome you to the team." And what I didn't know was that that 1 hour lunch was a 1 hour interview. And by the time we
Ah,
finished lunch, I was offered a job in human resources at the chemical plant. And he had asked me what I knew about HR. And for the record, the Army did pay for my master's degree in public policy administration. It was
right.
the only degree they offered where they were flying professors in. This is well before online learning, right? So they were
Sure,
flying
sure.
professors into military locations around our deployment so we could get master's degrees. So that was great. And he said, "What do you know about HR?" And I said, "I think I can spell it." And that was about all I knew. Right? Because all of HR in the Army is congressionally mandated. Aside
Right.
from the employee
Yes.
relations bit of it,
Yeah.
there's no developing a new wage guide. Congress does that. There's no
Right.
developing your benefits. That's the VA system, right? So there's all of these different things. So it was a very different world. And I had asked him, "Why me?" And he said, first. He loved the idea of bringing in a veteran to the HR department. It would be new for the company.
Yeah.
And they had brought in a bunch of veterans for other parts of the company. They had all been succeeding. And he said, I just want to hire someone who's really smart and hardworking. And if you
Yeah.
survive 10 years in the Army, I know you're going to come and work every day on time. You're going to give your best. And I will teach you everything you need to know. And he was true to his word. And he sent me for some training, got me my first certification. Well, he didn't get, I mean, he paid for it so I could go through
Sure.
the
Yeah.
program. And then he retired and left me there. So 23 years later, I'm still in human resources. And I still want to thank Larry for doing that, for getting me all set up. But it was, I went up for a baseline physical and had no idea I was going to walk out with a new career path.
I
So,
love that story. And it's so funny because I feel like most of us end up in human resources sort of like in that way where it's almost accidental or someone
hmm,
approaches us and is like, "Hey, what do you think about maybe trying this?" Or,
yeah,
it's almost like a challenge, right? Like they approach
right.
certain people and they're like, "What do you think about trying this out?" And you're like, "Oh, all right, that sounds kind of interesting." Then you get kind of like roped into it. It's
Right. Well, and it was just kind of
yeah,
funny because the job I had accepted was like sort of an on-call doing these big maintenance programs through
right.
the chemical facility. And he kind of hit the right button at the right time. At that time, I mentioned the reason I got out was, divorce and custody battle. I was a single mom with two little kids. And
Right.
he said, if you take the job that you have accepted, you'll be working overnights, hard hat, steel-toed boots. I'm not afraid of hard work and hard hats and
No,
steel-toed
right,
boots. That was fine. And he said, but he goes, you can put on a suit and work like 8 to 5 every day. You're home every night for dinner with your kids.
right.
And I'm not going to lie, that was a big, a tipping point for me. And I said, wait, I
Sure.
can still make this, decent money. I'm doing something new. I'll be challenged. And I don't have to worry about what if something goes wrong in the chemical plant. I have to be there overnight. Right.
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah, I kind of tripped into it and I just got lucky that it was a good fit.
that's yeah, that's amazing. And it really evolved into a pretty deep understanding fairly quickly of people, right? And
Hmm.
this didn't just stop at the chemical plant. I mean, it became and evolved into managing people at a very large scale,
Hmm.
which I believe, and again, we'll get into why I believe the military sets us up for some of this stuff as
Hmm.
HR professionals, especially when we're scaling this at a large level, because HR can be anywhere from a smaller size organization all the way up to thousands, which is
Hmm.
your sweet spot, right? And
Hmm.
it we can manage all different kinds of people in between, but where your specialty went to took you to an organization where you were building culture across about 2,000 employees,
Hmm.
which is not easy to do. So talk a little bit about that journey. It evolved into you kind of taking on um, HR from 31 locations across
Hmm.
Pennsylvania for the Faulkner
Right.
Automotive Group, which
Right.
obviously didn't happen overnight, but
Sure.
that's where we're at. I mean, that's where that evolved to. So
Right.
talk a little bit about
So
that journey.
sure. So when I left the chemical plant, I was actually an HR manager, for it was for Sunoco for 5 of their refineries.
Right.
So that was in 3 states, 4 states, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and um, Oklahoma. And so I was already used to sort of traveling and having dispersed teams
Yeah.
through that group. And then I went into consulting and I was in charge of human resources for North America for a consulting firm with 60 offices throughout the US and Canada. So I was traveling all the time. And
Yeah.
then when I was offered this opportunity where I currently am, um, I think that background of having these dispersed teams, sort of across countries, was really helpful. So when I got here, we had 11 dealerships and about maybe 700 employees.
Right.
And within 6 weeks of my employment, that was the automotive bailout, right? And we were in 2008, deep into the recession.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it was a really, really trying time those first couple of years. And once we sort of came out of that recession, the family really started pushing hard, and we have acquired, I think it's like 15 dealerships in the past, I don't know, 15, more than that, Yeah, in the past 15 years, right? So we've just been acquiring and
Right.
acquiring and acquiring the whole time. So the original plan was, maybe one every 18 to 24 months, and it turned into like one every 8 to 10 months. And we just
Right.
kept growing. So we went from 11, then down to 7, and then up to 31. And I've been with the company about 17 years. So it's been a lot of work through that, through these times. But what I can tell you is, leaning back on the military and being moved every 2 years to having to create a new team every single time. And I was an officer, so I was in charge of the group. And, I have to be really honest that there is no way you do culture by yourself. It cannot be an
No.
HR initiative, right?
Right.
So when you come in, the idea is to really lean on the institutional knowledge and all the really good employees that are already there and figure out what works best for them and then model it every single
Right.
day. I mean, that's really the only thing that you can do is immerse yourself in it and live it. And then as you bring in new ideas, it's sort of dripping on them, right? Like, hey, here's another
Yes.
little thing. Let's try it. Let's try it. Let's try it. And you have to be really patient. And, unfortunately, patience is not one of those things I have in abundance. So I have to work really, really hard at that. Um, but I think when you start working with people and you start finding all of the good that they're already doing, that makes it easier to sort
Yep.
of bring that culture along. So by the time I came to this organization, what I learned was, I think I'm a pretty good HR person, right? I've got some
I'll
awards and
say.
accolades for that. But
Yeah.
what I think I'm really, really good at is connecting people.
Yes.
And as I started working with our field managers, that took a little bit of time. I'm the first HR person they ever had in this company. And the company is 93 years old. So I've been here 17 years. So it's like a blip of time in this company's
Right.
history. So it took a little bit of time to earn people's trust. But once I did, they were kind of like, wait, we have a pretty strong advocate on staff. And I said, I have a really strong group of advocates out in the field. And the
Right.
closer we can work together and sort of share common language, share common experiences, the easier it is to develop that culture together.
Very well said and very well executed, clearly.
Thanks.
And now we get to talk about why the military may have prepared this and your framework, which I think
Hmm.
it's kind of this is a very beautiful correlation between those two things because I want to paint a picture sort of people that are listening to this of where you're located and sort of the geographical um, layout of this. So you actually it's 31 locations, right, in
Hmm.
Pennsylvania.
Right.
So we're not just talking urban Philly. We're talking
Right.
like rural areas too. So
Right.
these are dealerships and areas that are in like rural areas.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot of diversity in different areas. You have to know how
Hmm.
to talk to different people. There's a lot of different socioeconomic backgrounds, different people
Hmm.
from all different areas, right?
Right.
Very different legacy systems,
Hmm.
different values, different logistical situations that take place. And
Hmm.
in that, you have people that have different needs from each other, right?
Right.
Very different needs. And
Right.
so you said finding those commonalities, right? Which is what I believe a lot of people don't focus on. They try to find
Hmm.
a one size fits all model and say this
Right.
is it. Like everybody get on board with this. And then
Hmm.
you leave out like 80% of your people because
Right.
they can't buy into that, right?
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so you coming from the military background, and I believe this again, why I believe HR and military are so closely aligned, even though that seems like it wouldn't be, they seem
Hmm.
diametrically not the same.
Right.
But I mean, HR really, or military really understand people beyond paperwork because
Hmm.
it is a human experiment in a sense where people are put into an immersive lifestyle
Yes.
of leading under the most stressful life and death conditions there
Yeah.
are.
Hmm.
You have to learn how to motivate each other without bribery, right?
Right.
Because there's no system of like, I'll give you $100 if you
Right.
go first, right?
Right. Right.
Like it's no, you jump out of the plane first and I'll give you $1,000. No, that is not how that works, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So you
Yeah.
can't motivate with bribery in any
Right.
capacity. Um,
Right.
you have to learn how to read your morale of everybody else around
Hmm.
you, because if anybody on the team has a bad attitude or something like that, one poison apple rots the barrel, right? It
Right.
really does. In that environment, it becomes a pollutant. And
Yeah.
then you have all of these different personalities, all these different cultures, all
Hmm.
these different socioeconomic backgrounds, all the different stuff, right? All
Hmm.
has to point towards a common goal,
Right.
which is usually let's not get killed today, but also let's further the agenda of our nation and try
Hmm.
to serve out our mission of whatever that looks
Right.
like.
Right.
It's not textbook empathy,
Oh, not even close.
but it's
No.
empathy.
Right.
It's
It's almost more of the
organizational
tough
empathy.
love empathy,
Yeah, it's
right? It's
organizational empathy. It's accountability to the max,
yep.
because it's literal life and death.
Right.
And so now that might seem like that's way above the call of
Hmm.
duty, pun
It sounds
intended.
extreme, right? It
Right.
does. It sounds
But
quite extreme. Yeah.
when you break it down, if you can survive under those conditions and come out of that with the framework and the perspective and the lens that you came out of it with, now we're going to explain to the audience your framework and
Hmm.
how what I just said in your framework, that's what I thought about this weekend, was like how to handle crisis with calm, how to look
Hmm.
at processes under a lens of scrutiny, but doing that with a sense of psychological safety,
Hmm.
and looking at burnout as a way to as a mission risk, but how to mitigate
Right.
that, right? There's
Right.
different ways to look at this, and I think your framework, it outlines this beautifully in a lot more simple terms than the way I'm putting it right now.
Okay.
So let's get into your framework, because it really is about value alignment and
Right.
emotional intelligence, and you're starting to touch on getting these people together in a large scale, which is not easy to do.
Right.
But
Right.
this is where a lot of companies fail.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I like to say a lot is that it's more about purpose than performance, right? If we are aligned
Yes.
on our purpose, the performance will come because then we
Yes.
will all kind of do our best to do our best. And that will
Right.
automatically move that performance right along. I think that's really, really important. And I think about a couple of things that have happened in the past. I remember a manager that I was working with who, when I was explaining to him that, the culture is really important, and that sounded a little too soft for him. And he said, I'm not a culture guy. I'm a results guy. Right.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
he just, the turnover was outrageous. And it was like, you're kind of like beating this horse, like, come on, get on board here. You've got to treat these people like human beings, right?
Right.
It's all about the human first.
Right.
And then the work will come. And, it took about 6 months to get this person sort of back on track and stop that, the constant turnover that was happening under his watch, because he was
Right.
such a jerk, right? And it was like the job's not that hard, right? I haven't been, and I kind of joke like I'm not a neurosurgeon, right? We're not doing rocket
Right.
science here, right?
Right.
We're selling stuff or we're
Right.
fixing stuff, and that's what most jobs kind of, at the end kind of come down to, right? You're selling or fixing or producing a widget, and once we kind of get that down pat, then it's like, okay, well, the only way all of this happens is by having really, really strong teams around us.
Right.
So I kind of think about that a lot. But again, that moving from performance to purpose as your foundation, I think, is important, because although the
Right.
job is to manage the outcomes, the real work that we have to do as leaders is to shape energy. Right.
Yes.
So as we start shaping
Well
people's
said.
energy, thank you, and getting that commitment, right, then it all kind of works from there. And I think about the first time I really, really understood this was, I was a 23-year-old in charge of a Patriot missile site in Saudi Arabia guarding an airfield.
Right.
I was 23, the only woman on site in charge of 150 men. And if you don't think tensions get pretty high, because now we're around the holidays as well, so we're all missing the holidays. And I
Right.
want to add, my own personal issue was I had left a 10-week-old behind. I was a new mom right before we deployed. So I'm already sort of all up in my own head with the mommy guilt and all of the other things, leaving a 10-week-old behind to
Right.
deploy for 6 months. And I remember I had a young soldier. He was 19. Listen to me. I was 23. He was 19. And he was just, I mean, full of anxiety, a bit of depression. He was off. He was just off his game. And he was normally in garrison, he was a fantastic soldier.
Right.
And the two of us, it must have been midnight, and we're out, sort of out in the desert. We each have our bottle of water, and I sat down next to him, and I literally said, "What the hell is going on with you? You need to get your head right." And I was kind of harsh, right? And he just dropped his head. He's like 6'5", really, really strong. And here I am going, "What the heck is wrong with you?" And he
Right.
dropped his head, and I said, "What is going on with you?" And he said, "When I was in high school a year ago, I was the star basketball player. And I really
Mm,
thought I was going to get a scholarship and I was doing something different with my life. And here I am, I'm a private, and I have to sweep out, warehouses, and I have to run around in the dirt, and and he was feeling pretty down on himself.
right.
And in my head, I was like, buck up, get back to work, right? That was going through my head. And I saw this guy who wasn't much younger than I was, who was having this sort of existential crisis, like, what does my
Yeah.
life mean today? And
Yeah.
we probably spent a half hour, 45 minutes talking about both of us playing sports and finding the connections, right? Where, hey, I was supposed to go take a scholarship, and I probably would have been, a happy third grade teacher if I'd gone to Florida and played volleyball on the
Right.
beach. But here I am with a Patriot system, leaving a 10-week-old behind. And, as we had that conversation, I explained to him that, well, you might be the star player, but you're an important player, right? And you couldn't have been a star without the other four guys on the court with you.
Hmm.
So today you're one of the other four guys in the court, but you can still be the
Right.
star player. It's going to take some practice. It's going to take some time, right? So you're going to have to
Yeah.
practice as hard, and kind of had this sports analogy type stuff. But
Right.
by the end of it, he kind of looked up at me and he was like, "Hey, Lieutenant, thanks for having that conversation." He ended up being one of my favorite soldiers, but I got in really close with him that way to figure out what was going on in his head. And he continued being a really, really good soldier, but I started realizing, like, once the ego gets out of the way and you start
Yes.
talking to the human, and realize that, and I use this saying now in human resources, when people are like, "Oh, they're just put in a job title." I was like, well, if the job wasn't important, we wouldn't have hired for it and we wouldn't pay for it. So the
Right.
job's important. Every single
Yes.
job has some impact, right?
Yes.
So I think that's important, is to meet people where they are, and then recognize if they're happy where they are and they want to be a specialist. I want you to applaud that and celebrate that. And if they're at some point and they're working their way up the ladder, that we say, "Hey, I understand," and you know, we work with them on that as well. But we give people what they need as best
Right.
we can.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes it's as simple as having a conversation. And I
Hmm.
think that's the piece that's sorely missing because most of the time, um, we are looking for that one size fits all.
Hmm.
And it's easier to just do that because
Right.
then it's that one piece off our plate that we don't have
Right.
to worry about. And I do believe that over the the years, HR has become less of a strategic function in organizations than it used to be. I
Right.
get a lot less requests from HR practitioners that I've worked with over the years for like reporting
Hmm.
from stuff, like what does our numbers look like for this that we manage for them? Um,
Right.
our CFO would like to see these reports about this. I see a lot
Right.
less of that
Right.
than I used to. And I think there's that side of it. So there's obviously more focus, I think, on engagement, which is good. But I
Hmm.
also think that there is focus on ticking boxes
Hmm.
versus actually getting into the core of what's really going on. And I think when we take the time to sit and talk to each other, even in a company where we might have a ton of different cultures or a ton of different people with different backgrounds and different things like that, we tend to be able to find more commonalities
Hmm.
than we do differences
Right.
when we just sit down and talk. Like your conversation with, I'm assuming he was a private.
Yes.
Yeah, with the young private. He opened up to you about something that was going on with him when he was able
Hmm.
to drop his walls, drop his guard,
Right.
drop his ego, and talk about what was really under the surface, which was
Hmm.
insecurity
Right.
and
Right.
which was feeling of failure, right? I'm not good enough, is what he was saying
Right.
to you. I'm not feeling
Right.
validated in some way.
Right. Right.
And so you were able to give him that ear, give him that
Right.
time, acknowledgement, and he felt better. He
Hmm.
came away with a different lens, a different perspective.
Right. Right.
And that's usually all people need.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be an HR person that does that for somebody in an organization. That's the other thing we forget.
Right.
But I think the other piece to this too, and I've had this conversation a lot recently, is that in some organizations that have not great values or
Hmm.
not great stability in their
Hmm.
values, right? They may have values, but they may not be, like you said,
Right.
operating in them in everything they
Sure.
do.
Sure.
Again, performative values.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
their people may not feel comfortable having these conversations because they don't feel psychologically safe enough in their workplace
Yeah.
to say, this is who I am,
Yep.
and I feel comfortable enough to share this piece because I don't
Right.
know if it's safe enough to say this or not. We're in a
Yeah.
cancel culture society too, which adds a whole other layer to this because we have half of the world that says if you don't, well, not maybe half, but
Sure.
half of the world that says
Yeah.
if you don't diametrically agree with everything I say,
Hmm.
I am going to cancel you.
Right.
So there's like a whole like, it's a weird time we're living in, but that's where those values have to be
Right.
in alignment and lived in everything we do. And then your people know what's safe to say and what's not safe to say, and introduce activities and things that we do. Like you said, introduce stuff one, like it doesn't, you have to eat the whole whale in one bite.
Right.
Oh,
Right. Well, and I think about when people are like, oh, we have this culture. I'm like, well, you don't launch a culture. That's not how it works.
no, your
Right.
people
You
are your
have to live
culture.
it. That's
Yes.
how it works, is you have to live it and be fully immersed in it. And you mentioned, being in the military. Talk about the ultimate immersion,
Oh,
right? Is
yes.
it's sort of all day, every day, 24/7, 365 is
It's like
a
being
big,
thrown into all the world's countries all at once.
all at the same time, right?
Yes.
And I do. And I think about the soldiers we had were from all over the place, just
Yes.
all over the place. And they tackled problems in different manners. And sometimes there would be arguments and fights about it, right? And it was kind of like, well, why don't you take the best of each of you and
Yes.
combine it together and it's even better, right? And
Right.
that's kind of hard to do because, I mean, I don't want to lose the sight of there is a lot of ego and a bit of machismo, right, in the military.
Right.
So
Right.
a lot of the folks that volunteer to join already have a pretty strong sense of self, right?
Yes.
And then they
Of
spend the
course.
first year being broken down, right, to
Yes.
the base level. And then, and I've had people say, how can you handle being yelled at all the time? How can you blah, blah, blah? And it's like, once you understand the psychology behind bringing everyone down to a base level together and then building them up together
Right.
strengthens and fortifies that team,
Right.
right? And that's why I say it's like you can't just launch it. You have to live it every single day. It has to be part and parcel of who you are and who your organization is. So when I think about the diversity going from Philadelphia all the way out through central Pennsylvania, right?
Right.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we're in the same industries, we're doing the same thing. So we have an overall corporate culture. And
Right.
we have our ethics and our values and all of that's defined, and we have them on the walls, right, in all
Sure.
of our locations. So of course, like that's sort of the
Sure.
performative part that you were talking about. But in each location, there are subcultures, right? So they're just slightly different, but generally speaking, they all align with the overall culture. And that's the
Yes.
important part.
And that's
That
and that's the way to do it.
Right. And I'll tell you, it feels different when you walk into a dealership in Philadelphia versus a dealership in Mechanicsburg. It
Right.
just feels wildly different because the people are different, right? The pace
Sure.
is different. And when I bring these folks together into leadership development training that we do, I've been doing this for about 15 years now within the company. When I pull them all together from all different parts of the state, and and they all have different levels of education, experience, backgrounds, all of the different things, right? So it's a nice little
Right.
melting pot when they all come together for the training, is they realize that they're all facing very similar issues, right? Because customers are customers, right?
Yes.
The product is
Yes.
the product. So while they vary by manufacturer, it's kind of all the same thing. Sorry about that.
Oh,
It's
you're
all
fine.
the same thing. And when they realize that they all have to deal with the same types of things and they can work together
Right.
to come up with some best practices. And then when they think about when they word play it or role play it, right, they might use different words, they might speak at a different tempo, but they're going to get the same point across. And all of a sudden they realize I have a lot more in common with the guy who went hunting this morning before he came into work than the guy who went clubbing last night. Like, I'm making that up, right? But like
Yeah, sure.
wildly different, right? Just a wildly different um background and perspective and lens, but ultimately those different subcultures kind of pull through, and as long as they're all aligning with the major culture, then we're in a good place. And I
Yeah,
think the
absolutely.
army is very much like that, right? When I was in a Patriot
Yes.
group versus being in a division, artillery was different than being in, a supply company was different. They were all but all heading toward the same overall mission. We all had the same fundamental baselines.
Sure. Well, and I think what the military does too, that's different than corporations in a lot of cases, is in the military, we you're given pretty transparent information about what your mission details are, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think with corporations, sometimes we're not,
Mm,
or we're given selective transparency, right? Where
sure.
you're told this is what's going on, really, this is we're being transparent, but not really being transparent. But then do people really want the full transparent picture because they might panic, right? And
Right.
so again, we're back to this whole thing. So I believe it starts at the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes leadership's responsibility. Now, your nickname is the Dragon Slayer, which
Mm-hmm.
is the heroic, obviously, interpretation
Mm-hmm.
of someone that's not afraid to back down from challenge or chaos
Right.
or
Right.
or the storm, right?
Right.
And that's how you got that nickname, was because you're not afraid to just be like, look, we need to be accountable today. And
Right.
we need to attack maybe some archaic processes or some things that need to be shifted, or this is not working for us anymore, and we need to come to
Mm-hmm.
a solution that's going to evolve and work. And so I want to talk about the top, right? Because we talk
Mm-hmm.
about dripping this into everything we do, and the like everybody has to be on the same page. But
Right.
really, it starts at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And if the executive team is sometimes the dragon,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes challenging because they
Right.
can't get out of their own way, right? And so their values driven accountability sometimes is not in alignment with where we need it to be to get the rest of the organization in
Yeah.
alignment, because it's kind of like one of those things like do as I say, not as I do.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that generations 3 and 4, we all know how much they love to be told what to do and not get the why
Right.
behind it. So,
Right.
I mean, what do we do with leadership when they're the dragon and we
Sure.
slay them? Because that's, I mean, that's a big, I would say that's probably the number one problem I
Mm-hmm.
have with corporations today, is telling the CEO or the CFO or the COO or whoever it is, you need to get out of the way because you're the
Yeah.
problem. And you're like, if you get out of the way, your business would probably 3x in about 6 months if you
Right.
would
Right.
step out of the picture for a minute, right?
Sure. Sure. Well, I want to take a step back. So the Dragon Slayer nickname came because I was using an executive coach for myself, and he didn't give me the nickname as a compliment initially.
Oh,
It wasn't that, but man, did I
oh
lean
my
into
gosh.
it.
Well, it's a compliment now.
I leaned way the heck into it. I
You
said,
should
hell
have.
yeah,
It's a compliment now.
I've slayed dragons. The way the conversation went was we were talking about behavioral profiling and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, you
Right.
like to come in, sort of slay the dragon, and then walk away and find the next one, and everyone else is picking up the mess behind you. And I
Oh,
went, oh, shoot. And then we started realizing sort of where I really love to be is in the firefight, right? I like to
Right.
be in
Yeah.
the middle of the conflict and the growth and the something new because I find that challenging and exciting. But
Right.
then the day to day keeping things moving
Yeah.
is um you kind of keep doing the same thing over and over again. And for me, my brain wants that next challenge.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, okay, is everybody good? I'm going to go
Right.
over here now. Right. And then
Yeah.
they kind of
Yeah.
laugh at me and they're like, and she's off to slay another dragon. I'm like, yes, where's the next big scaly monster
Right.
that I can get my arms around? So,
Totally.
so that's part of it. But yeah, as I've, that was years and years ago. And I'm just leaning so heavily into it because
You
I'm like, there are
should.
so many dragons to slay
There are.
and you know what, embrace it. But what do I think happens with executives in particular is I think the biggest dragon for many managers is the illusion of control, right?
Yeah.
They
It's
just they have processes and follow my process and that's it. And I think we kind of get stuck in process mode. And I'm
yeah.
saying that as someone who believes process is important, right? For all
Right.
the easy stuff. Um,
Yes.
and so that you can kind of do things systematically, you can have consistent results. All of that's very, very important, right? But when you have a stranglehold on process or the unending reporting that nobody looks at, that you spend all of your time doing, you miss the potential for progress because you're so
Yes.
stuck in it. But people like that process because they feel like they're in control, right? They have some control over all the things that they're doing and it feels safe, but it
Yeah.
tends to strangle innovation because there's no looking left and no looking right. Now, when I was in the military, right, if you looked left and right, aside from having your head on a swivel, right, if you're looking left and right, or
Right.
you move left or right without the rest of your group, bad things can happen. So I
Yes.
understand
Absolutely.
that perspective, but not every single project or opportunity that we're facing is a battlefield. It's just not.
Right.
So when we can flex, we should flex. And I think about that when I think about, I did a speaking engagement a few days ago where I talked about flexibility within a framework. And what I really wanted to hammer home was the idea that it makes sense to be flexible when it serves people and it serves your mission, right?
Yes.
It
Yep.
makes sense to hold firm to protect the organization, right? But there's more often than not ability and time to be flexible. And I think that's what we really need to kind of work on is, trust the people you hire, trust the process that you have in place, but don't hide behind it. If someone's working the
Right.
process and says, hey, I've got a better idea, I can get that a little bit faster, do things a little bit differently, I can improve upon it, then be open for that. But
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's
I,
what I think when
I,
I see these managers who kind of get stuck, I'm like, I've made this joke a few times, like 1985 called and they want their compensation plan back, right? Or they want their benefit structure back. Like, it worked
right.
great in 1985. I will honor 1985, but also it's been a minute, right? So take a
Absolutely.
step forward.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's an important distinction to make between, because I obviously I work with AI every day, right? And
Hmm.
this is something that comes up with AI a lot because there's this shift happening, right, between
Hmm.
like process driven stuff within AI.
Right.
And my philosophy is when you want to use AI in something, you sit down and you look at the process. Not
Hmm.
every process should be automated.
Right.
It just shouldn't, right?
Right.
So you have to know what your processes are. And on the flip side of that coin, the people that are advising on that process need to know what goes on in
Hmm.
that process before they advise against it. And
Right.
so if you don't know a process, you should not be inserting yourself in there to try to tell other people if that's going to work or not,
Right.
or that they should just throw the baby out with the bathwater, or that
Right.
they should, go forward with that process if it's archaic.
Right.
I mean, there's like steps that have to take place in there. And I think with some executives, if they're leading from a place back to the old ego, our friend,
Hmm.
the amigo ego, that we love to put in the way of everything else,
Hmm.
ego, avoidance, all of these things, like let's sweep it under the rug. Maybe it won't,
Hmm.
maybe no one will say anything. Or like
Right. Right.
just
Right.
denial that there's even a problem in general.
Right.
So those types of things happen and then nothing moves forward. Those
Right.
companies will not survive
Yep.
in what's coming in the next. few years
Hmm.
with the advances, because it's going to the way we think about work is going to change,
Right.
and things will be evolving so quickly that if we don't look at our processes and the way that we think
Hmm.
about work and the way that people think about their jobs,
Right.
it's going to be very different. So getting in that progressive mindset of like, let's drop the ego and
Hmm.
start looking at, do we want to solve the problem, or do we want to try to just live with it and throw caution to the wind and say like, maybe we'll survive, maybe we won't.
Hmm.
It's a 50-50 gamble, and I don't know that I like those odds.
Yeah, well, and I think about sort of taking it back to HR, right? Is with
Yeah.
the you know, all of the incoming AI tools that are available to us, right? You can't lose the human aspect of it. I think
No, of course not.
it's good to get some prompts and good ideas, but you can't take the human out.
No.
But then the second part is recognizing that the pace of business intelligence and the accessibility and the democratization of data, ooh, that was a hard one to say, say that 5 times fast,
Say that five
is
times fast.
coming so fast that
Yeah,
if, I have joked for years and years, like you can't spell math with HR, right?
right.
And all of a sudden, all this data is coming in. And if we don't start to put our arms around it, and understand what that intelligence is telling us, not just from an HR perspective, but understanding what's really important in the business, um, we're gonna be left behind, right?
Yeah.
So I believe there was an article just recently about Amazon is going to bring AI into the HR team. There's going to be a 15% reduction in the HR workforce. I
Yes.
believe I read there's like 10,000 employees. That means 1,500 jobs are going away because of AI for things that can be automated. And I think about that on a much smaller scale for the organization I currently work for. And I don't see AI as that much of a threat for us at this point. But we have been
Correct.
using automation as much as we can all the way through to keep our staff lean so that we're not spending all of our time hand keying information into an HRIS. We're using an
Smart.
applicant tracking system that automatically, do you know what I mean? Like we're
Yeah, yeah.
doing the automation that
Yeah.
way. But
Smart.
I think where we're sort of missing the boat in HR overall is getting our arms around those dashboards and then asking the operators, what do these actually mean? And then
Yes.
how can I translate what I bring to the table in a way that's going to bring the organization forward? And
Yeah.
that's what I think. And when I think back to the military, it was I couldn't just be when I was a logistician in an artillery group. I've told this story before, but I had a colonel who I would give my update every 12 hours and he would zone out. And I was like, I was using Excel when Excel first came out. I had spreadsheets that were updating a master sheet and I was like, whiz bang, beautiful
Yeah.
work. And I was boring the heck out of everybody in the room and they didn't know what I was talking about because I was using logistics language. How many short tons onto this, that, the other. I wasn't using the nicknames for the supplies that they were using. I was using
Right.
the technical names and I lost them. And I went to one of my friends who was another captain and I said, come on, you're sitting in these things. What am I missing? And he's like, you are so boring. And I said, what do you mean? And he's like, we have no idea what you're talking about. And I said, the
Right.
Army sent me to school to learn this. I'm using the language that the Army taught me. And he goes, yeah, but we didn't go to that school. And he said, look at the map, look at the battlefield, translate your message to what makes sense to him. And the next shift, I came in with my beautiful whiz bang spreadsheet and handed it to the colonel. And I said, sir, you have all the data in front of you. Let me tell you what it looks like on the battlefield. And I
Yeah.
turned around and I point to the map and I said, 1,500 hours, you're going to do all of these things. I have enough supply situated here, blah, blah, blah. And oh, by the way, there's additional that you can use to do something else. At 2,100 hours, you're going to be over here. And all of a sudden, now I'm handsy here, right? But I'm like
Right.
all over the map. I'm all over. And I said, and I kind of added some jokes in. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden he leaned forward and said, well, wait a minute. Do you think that's the best use of our supplies? Maybe we could do something else. And I said, sir, what do you have in mind? Now, I don't know how to prep the battlefield from an artillery perspective. I know generally because I've been in all the meetings, but I don't know how to do it. I'm not trained to do it. But I said, what are you thinking? And all of a sudden, other people jumped into the conversation.
It
I ended
became
up
collaborative.
facilitating a conversation.
Yeah.
I didn't, but all of a sudden, he just looked at me and he goes, well done, Captain. And I walked away like, that was fun, right? It was different. I still had all of my stuff was
Yeah.
presented, but in a way that made sense. And I kind of feel like sometimes when we're in a support fields like HR, IT, accounting, whatever. We're so much into our own lingo and lexicon and our own projects and things like that that we
Yes.
forget what we're doing to the operators. And
Yes.
that sounds weird because I always hate, hearing like, well, you don't provide, you don't bring in any money. You're not a profit center. I'm like, no, 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 but I have an ROI. So, and my ROI
Right.
is I know more about human resources employment law than anybody in my entire company. I know that for a fact. I don't have to
Right.
bang them over the head with it. What I need to do is come in and say, let me give you a different perspective, a different angle, and how can I integrate that? And that I think makes all the difference.
It you hit the nail so hard on the head. You didn't have
Thanks.
to hit it a second time. It went in. That is 1,000% correct because it's what a lot of HR representatives or practitioners don't understand sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's lack of wanting to understand. It's maybe just training or knowledge, and that's why we do these podcasts, right? This is a resource. Everybody that's on these
Right,
podcasts, we're a resource to everybody that they can reach out to any of us.
right,
But it's about speaking the right language. If I go in and talk to a CFO, I'm going to present the language you just used,
mm-hmm.
ROI. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
talk about retention and what that means from a monetary standpoint to the company.
Right, right,
If I go into the CEO, I'm going to have a very different conversation using probably very different language. If
right,
I go into the COO, I'm going to have a different conversation, probably using very different language.
right.
It
But you're
depends
still
on
talking about the same thing. It's
correct.
just,
Right.
yeah, it's really the getting to know your audience. And I think what
Yes.
happens a lot in HR is we get so bogged down by all the administrative work that we have to
Yes.
do
Yep.
that we don't look up from our
Yes.
desk, right?
Yes. That's
Or like
always
you had
tunnel
mentioned at
vision.
the beginning, yeah, like you're asked for so many different types of reports. Automate those reports, right? Get those off your desk. You don't have time for
Yes.
that
Yep.
because the minute you leave your office, or your desk and you go into the field. So with my own team, I have them spending days in the field in different departments so they can learn what the business is actually doing and they can understand the
Yeah.
language better. I think it makes you a better recruiter. So you know the kind of person or the skill set experience you're looking for. But generally speaking, you become a better business partner when you really understand the business and not just your specific
Yes.
little niche. Right. I think that becomes really
Yeah.
important as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the next dragon that's coming up, right? For the workforce as a whole is really going to be agility, right? Understanding that this AI disruption is really just another tool that's coming in. You need to understand, just like everybody's going to need to understand how to leverage it, right? How to use it safely. You talk about knowing more about HR law than anybody else. I believe every HR person should be brushing up on their AI ethics, like become an AI ethicist, because legislation will come around this. It will become a legal situation. You probably have about 85% shadow AI users in your company right now. If you don't know what that is, go look it up. It's kind of scary if you don't know where your company data is being used. Go look it up. But these are conversations that need to start taking place, and it's likely going to be framed in HR's realm
Yeah.
because of compliance, because it's
Right.
going to end up in employee handbooks, because it's going to be a legality situation, because it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
monitored. It's going to have things you can use it for, things you cannot use it for. Um, HR is going to have their hands on this.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, learn how to automate the things you can automate so that it frees you up to be able to do this.
Right.
Because what's going to have to happen is people are going to need to look at work differently. And what I mean by that is, who am I after AI comes in, right? Don't think about AI is coming in to take my job. Think about AI is coming in to
Right.
help me leverage certain things that I can do, automate.
Right.
How can I reimagine what my job looks like after that? Can I add value to the company because I'm taking stuff off my plate, not to add more work,
Right.
but are there things that I can be doing to make myself more effective, more efficient? Like you said, learning new language of how to talk to people, learning how to pull
Right.
reports, learning how to make myself a more strategic HR person.
Right.
How can I
Right.
educate myself to make myself better and elevate myself? That's
Yeah.
the way to think about it. Not AI is going to come in and take my job, so I'm going to hide under my desk and pretend like it's not going to happen. It's here, it's happening.
Right. And I think
So,
about, every time we've had some sort of a software update, I don't want to say it's the same thing, but it's so similar, right? When I
yes.
first started recruiting 23 years ago in the chemical plants, all recruiting was done in Excel spreadsheets. And we just
Oh,
had
it
lists and
was.
lists and tabs by all of our
People
open
still
jobs.
do it that way.
Right. So we had all of this. And when
Yeah,
applicant tracking systems came in place, we didn't say, oh my gosh, they don't need recruiters anymore. It was a
right.
different way
No,
of handling the data so that you could spend more time on the phone in person, you
right.
know, digging for resumes, all that kind of stuff. It changed it. So yeah, so I think the idea of embracing it as it's coming along versus hiding from it is really the way to go. And that's what keeps you
Absolutely.
at the forefront of our profession, as well as keeps you employed, right? It keeps
Yeah.
you a valuable member of your team. Because I couldn't imagine coming into a company that has automation and saying, you know what, no, thank you. I'm going to go back to my Excel spreadsheet. How many?
Yeah,
We have
I'm good.
108 open jobs. I'm going to have 108 open tabs. Not a problem.
That'd be
That's just
like me
crazy.
saying, I'm not going to ever send another email again. I think I'll
Right.
go back to FedExing and facsimile.
Right. And
Give me a
I'm
break.
gonna get a Rolodex and I'm gonna call everybody all the time. Like,
Good
yeah.
luck.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
good
right.
luck. But
Right.
yeah, well,
So
I appreciate you being here. I know we're about out of time.
thanks.
Final question for you, Dina. What's your coaching mantra right now? I mean, what's your kind of hope for everybody for the future, and what should they kind of be saying to themselves right now as we kind of come to the end of the year?
Sure. A couple things. One is, perfectionism. She might be the prettiest dragon in the cave. But right, it looks like excellence, but it feels like fear.
Yeah,
So don't worry about being perfect all the time, right? Um, when you keep pursuing that, you just don't move forward. So don't worry about that. And the second part, especially when you're having a hard time, is no dragons, no legends, right?
I
You
love that.
cannot build
Yep,
courage without conflict. You just can't. But every challenge you face is shaping your legacy if you let it.
right.
So don't be afraid of it. And when I do think about that whole, the dragon slayer kind of a theme is, sometimes it's scary out there, but you know what you're doing. You have to have confidence in yourself and,
Absolutely.
be that catalyst for change.
That was awesome. Well, thank you so much for being
Thanks.
here, Dina Perreault. Again, you can find her on LinkedIn. She has her P3 Dragon Slayer model, which is people, processes, and performance. And you're getting ready to launch your new leadership firm too, which is super
I am
exciting. That's coming up on around November 1st, right? So
November 1st.
tell
Yep.
us a little bit about that. They can reach you on LinkedIn, right? Do you have a website open for that yet?
Correct. The website is in development. It should be ready by
Okay,
November 1st. It's called p3consults.com.
perfect.
And I will be leaning heavily into executive coaching and leadership development and public speaking. So I'm
Awesome.
excited for that to get started.
Wonderful.
Okay, let's be real. That conversation with Dina just rewired how I think about leadership entirely. Three things you can't ignore from this episode. First, that story about the 19-year-old soldier in the Saudi desert. That's operational empathy in action, not textbook theory, real human connection under pressure. Second, her free framework isn't just cute acronyms. People, processes, and performance actually work when you live it, not just launch it. And third, here's the kicker. She got the Dragon Slayer nickname because her coach thought she was causing chaos. Instead of getting defensive, she owned it and turned it into her superpower. That's the kind of mindset shift we all need right now. AI is coming whether we like it or not, but leaders like Dina are showing us that the human element isn't going anywhere, it's getting more important. If this resonated with you, do me a favor, hit subscribe, drop a comment about your biggest takeaway, and share this with someone who needs to hear Dina's message. Seriously, we need more Dragon Slayers in leadership positions. Dina's launching 3 consults this month, so connect with her on LinkedIn if you want to learn more about her leadership development work. Thanks for listening to Talent Talks. Keep pushing forward.